The phone rang at 2:13 a.m. Zethran Kale was already awake. Not because he expected it. Not because something told him to be. He was awake because sleep had stopped being easy months ago, right around the time the papers got signed and the house got too quiet. He stared at the ceiling. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He almost let it go. Almost. Is this Zethran Kale? A woman's voice. Controlled. Clinical. Yes. You're listed as an emergency contact for a Cairo Velan. The name hit different at 2 a.m. Cairo Velan. 6 months. 6 months of silence. 6 months of pretending that name didn't still live somewhere in the back of his chest like a splinter he never pulled out. Zethran sat up slowly. What happened? Not a question. He already knew the tone of a call like this. Pause on the line. The kind that carries weight before the words do. He was brought in about an hour ago. He collapsed during a delivery route. Delivery route. Zethran's jaw locked. He's stable for now, the nurse continued. But there are complications. What kind of complications? Another pause. Longer this time. Sir, he's alive. Barely. And she stopped. He's pregnant. The room went still. Not quiet. Still. The kind of still where your body stops functioning for exactly 1 second because the brain needs to catch up. Zethran stood up before she finished the sentence. Which hospital? She gave the address. He was already moving. Hi, viewers. If you found out someone you let go was secretly carrying your child and nearly died alone, what would be the first thing you'd do? Coat. Keys. Elevator. The lobby doors pushed open and the night air came at him fast. Rain. Cold. The kind that soaks through before you notice it's happening. He didn't notice. He was already in the car. Here's what didn't make sense. Cairo had resources. The divorce settlement wasn't small. There was no reason, not one logical reason, for a man like Cairo to be running delivery routes at midnight in the rain. Unless he wasn't using the settlement. Unless he walked away from all of it. Zethran pressed his foot down harder on the gas. The city blurred past him. Streetlights. Empty intersections. A cab cutting across 2 lanes. He moved through it like he had somewhere that actually mattered to be. And that feeling stopped him cold. When was the last time he'd moved like that for Cairo? When was the last time Cairo's name made him move at all? He didn't answer that. The hospital sign came into view. He pulled in hard, cut the engine, was out of the car before it fully settled. Through the sliding glass doors. Past the front desk. Badge in hand before anyone thought to ask. The nurse at the station looked up. Zethran Kale, he said. I'm here for Cairo Velan. She looked at him for a second longer than necessary. Room 214, she said. But sir, are you ready for what you're going to see in there? Zethran didn't answer. He was already walking. And somewhere in the back of his mind, one question kept circling. Quiet, relentless, and impossible to shake. 6 months. He was alone for 6 months. What exactly did Cairo do to survive? Room 214 was at the end of the hall. Zethran pushed the door open. And stopped. The man in the bed barely looked like Cairo. That was the first thing that registered. Not the machines. Not the 4 lines. Not the monitoring equipment beeping steady and low in the corner. Just the face. Pale. Hollowed out at the cheeks. Lips dry. Eyes closed with the kind of stillness that wasn't sleep. It was the body shutting down unnecessary functions to keep the core running. Cairo had always been lean. But this was different. This was someone who had been running on empty for a long time. A nurse came around the side of the bed. Mid-40s. Direct. She had the look of someone who had seen too many people show up late and try to look like they hadn't. You're the emergency contact, she said. Yes. When's the last time you saw him? Zethran didn't answer that either. She let it go. Barely. He came in around 1 a.m., she said, pulling up the chart. found by another driver on his route. He'd been on shift since 4 p.m. yesterday. 12 hours. In this weather. The word delivery route had already landed once. Hearing the timeline made it land again. Harder. He has a delivery job, Zithran said. Not asking. Processing. Night routes, mostly. It pays more. She set the chart down. He was careful to hide the pregnancy for as long as he could. Loose clothing. Scheduling around checkups. We're estimating he's approximately 22 weeks along. 22 weeks. 5.5 months. The math moved through Zithran's mind without permission. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Which meant Cairo already knew or was close to knowing when he signed those papers. And he said nothing. Walked out. Took nothing. And spent the next 5 months working double shifts in the rain to survive. Zithran moved to the chair beside the bed and sat down. Not because he felt steady enough to stand. Because his legs made the decision for him. He looked at Cairo's face. Really looked. There were marks under his eyes that weren't there before. The kind that come from not sleeping. From pushing through when the body says stop. From being stubborn in the worst possible way. The way that looks like strength until it becomes a hospital bed. A memory moved through him. Cairo at the dinner table, months before the divorce, trying to say something. Zithran remembered the way he'd started to speak. Then stopped. Looked at his plate. Picked up his fork. Zithran had been on a call. He hadn't asked what Cairo was going to say. He hadn't even looked up. The memory didn't feel like a memory right now. Felt like evidence. Another one came. Cairo eating alone in the kitchen at 10 p.m. because the three of them had run late on a deal and dinner got cold. He'd smiled when they came in. A small, careful smile. The kind you give when you've decided not to make something into a bigger thing than it needs to be. They'd walked past him to the office. Zithran pressed one hand against his knee. The nurse was still standing. He's been on his feet for most of the pregnancy, she said. The malnourishment is concerning. His blood pressure dropped significantly before he was found. The baby, Zithran said. Viable. We're monitoring closely. She paused. There's still risk. He nodded once. The room went quiet except for the monitor. Then Zithran heard himself ask the question before he decided to. Why didn't he ask for help? The nurse looked at him. Not unkindly. But with the kind of steadiness that came from being honest with people who weren't ready to hear it. Maybe he did, she said. She picked up the chart and moved toward the door. You just didn't listen. The door closed behind her. And Zithran sat in the silence she left, with Cairo's pale face in front of him and 5.5 months of choices pressing down on his chest like something he couldn't breathe around. He didn't move. The monitor beeped. Steady. Low. Still here. Valor arrived first. No call ahead. No announcement. He simply appeared in the doorway at 4:47 a.m., coat damp from the rain, eyes taking in the room in one slow sweep. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at Cairo. Then he stepped inside and stood at the foot of the bed with his hands in his pockets and his jaw locked tight. The way Valor looked when something had gotten past his defenses before he realized it was coming. Nyrix showed up 20 minutes later. His reaction was different. He stood in the doorway longer, like he was deciding whether to walk in or not. Then he pushed off the frame and came into the room with that particular energy he got when something didn't fit, when the world wasn't operating the way he thought it should. That's not possible, he said, low, almost to himself. 22 weeks, Zithran said. They confirmed it. Nyrix shook his head. Not denying the pregnancy. Denying the situation. The shape of it. The fact that they were standing in a hospital at 5 a.m. looking at a man they once shared a home with, and had no idea any of this was happening. He never said anything, Nyrix said. No, Zithran agreed. He didn't. Valor still hadn't spoken. He moved around the side of the bed, slowly, and stood closer, looking at Cairo's face the way Zithran had been looking at it for the last 2 hours, taking inventory, measuring the damage. His throat moved. That was all. The three of them stood in that room, and the silence between them was different from the regular kind. It had weight. It had edges. It was the kind of silence that comes when three people are standing inside the same truth and none of them wants to be the first to say it out loud. So Zithran said it. We all knew something was off. Neither of them argued. Because it was true. The signs had been there. Not dramatic ones. Nothing that forced attention. Just the slow, quiet kind of change that happens when someone starts pulling back, little by little, until one day the space where they used to be is just empty and you can't remember exactly when it happened. Cairo stopped sitting with them on weekends. Stopped coming to the door when they came home late. Stopped finishing sentences. And every single one of them had noticed. And every single one of them had thought the same thing. Someone else will handle it. Valor would assume Zithran said something. Zithran would assume Nyrix checked in. Nyrix would assume Valor was handling it. And Cairo? Cairo was alone in an apartment they didn't know about, working a job they didn't know about, carrying a child none of them knew about. Because none of them made it their business to know. Valor finally spoke. We failed him. 3 words. No drama. No argument. Just the plain fact of it sitting in the room with them. Nyrix turned away. Looked at the window. The rain was still going. A doctor came in, unhurried but serious. Mid-50s. He looked at all 3 of them without expression. The way doctors do when they've been at this long enough that no family dynamic surprises them. You're all listed as contacts? Yes, Zithran said. The doctor pulled a stool, sat down, and folded his hands. His vitals are improving. Slowly. But I need you to understand the situation clearly. He looked between them. The pregnancy is advanced enough that his body is under significant strain. The malnutrition has affected his reserves. He needs to stabilize before we can make longer-term assessments. No one moved. If he doesn't stabilize in the next 48 hours. He paused. Not for effect. Just to make sure they were hearing it. You'll lose both him and the child. The monitor beeped in the corner. Valor sat down in the chair beside the wall. Slow. Like something had gone out of his legs. Nyrix kept looking at the window, and Zithran looked at Cairo. Pale. Still. Quiet. Fighting something alone that he should have never had to fight alone. By 6 a.m., things started moving. That was the one thing the Kale name could still do in this city. It could move things. Zithran made 4 calls. By 7 a.m., a specialist from across the city was walking through the door. By 8 a.m., 2 more had arrived. The original attending stepped aside. Not unkindly, not by force, but because the quality of care in the room had just shifted by several levels and everyone in the hospital knew it. Nyrix handled the paperwork. All of it. Insurance. Billing. Every outstanding balance attached to Cairo's name. Cleared. He didn't ask how much. He didn't look at the numbers. He just signed where they pointed and moved on. Valor locked down the floor. Quietly. Efficiently. No visitors without clearance. Security at the stairwell. Nobody in, nobody out without a name on a list. By 9 a.m. the room looked different. Better equipment. Better monitoring. 2 nurses assigned specifically to this room, this patient, nothing else. The 3 of them stood in the hallway outside room 214 and looked at what they built in less than 3 hours. And none of it felt like enough. Because inside that room, with all the new machines and the better doctors and the cleared bills, Cairo still hadn't moved. Still unconscious. Still pale. Still fighting something that had nothing to do with what money could buy. Nyrix crossed his arms and stared at the door. We can control all of this, he said. The hospital. The staff. The costs. We can make sure he has everything. He stopped. And none of it changes what's happening in there. Nobody argued. That was the thing about the Kale Syndicate. They had built something significant in this city. 3 brothers who moved like one. Faster than competitors, harder than anyone expected. Territory, contracts, influence that stretched into rooms most people never got invited into. They could apply pressure to almost anything. Almost. The one person that mattered right now was lying in that room, not responding to any of it. And the reason he was there, the real reason, had nothing to do with money. Nothing to do with contracts or territory or influence. It had to do with a dinner table where someone tried to speak and no one looked up. With a man who smiled less and less and less, and nobody stopped long enough to ask why. Power can force outcomes. That's the truth. But it cannot undo what it chose to ignore. Zithran went back inside. Sat in the chair beside the bed. The new specialist was adjusting the monitors. He spoke in clipped, precise terms. Blood pressure trending upward, fetal heart rate consistent, hydration improving, but the malnourishment was going to be the slow problem. The body didn't recover from months of deprivation in hours. Zithran nodded. He wasn't really listening to the details anymore. He was looking at Cairo's hand. Just the hand. Resting at his side. Still. He thought about the last time he'd actually looked at Cairo's hands. Really looked. Not a glance. Not a passing thing. Just stopped. Looked. Paid attention to a person who was standing right in front of him. He couldn't remember. That was the honest answer. He couldn't remember. The monitor beeped. And then, just for a second, it flickered. A small dip. Gone in an instant. The specialist looked up. Checked the reading. Adjusted a setting. Nodded like it was fine. But it wasn't fine. It was a reminder. The line was still thin here. Zithran leaned forward. Elbows on his knees. Eyes on Cairo's face. He said nothing out loud. But the question was there, sitting in his chest, quiet and sharp. When did I stop knowing you? 3 days passed. Then 4. Then 5. Zithran stopped going home. He wasn't dramatic about it. Didn't announce it. Didn't make it a statement. He just stayed. The chair beside the bed became his chair. He learned the rhythm of the monitors. The shift changes. Which nurses came on at 7 and which came on at 3. Which specialist did rounds in the morning and which one came in the evening. He stayed. He talked. Not constantly. Not in a way that filled the room with noise. But in the quiet stretches, when the nurses were gone and the hallway was low. He would lean forward, elbows on his knees, and just speak. I called the house on Mercer closed, he said one afternoon. The one we were going to expand into. Valor didn't agree at first. But it didn't feel right to keep pushing on that while. He stopped. While things are like this. Cairo didn't respond. The monitor kept going. I remembered something yesterday, Zithran continued. You used to make coffee every morning for all 3 of us. Without being asked. You just did it. And we'd come down and it would be there. I don't think I ever said anything about it. He leaned back. I should have. On day 4, Valor stopped showing up to the morning strategy calls. Not with a reason. Not with an explanation. He just stopped appearing. His assistant rescheduled 3 meetings. Then 2 more. By day 5 he was staying at the hospital too. Different room. Down the hall. Sitting in a family lounge with his phone face down on the table. Nyrix canceled 2 contracts. Major ones. The kind that took months to build. He called the clients himself and said he needed time. No further explanation. 3 of the most calculated men in the city. Losing focus in ways that couldn't be faked. Because the thing about genuinely strong people is this. They don't always break loudly. They don't fall apart in ways anyone notices. They just start losing interest in everything that used to feel important. Quietly. Steadily, until the empire is still standing and they're somewhere in the middle of it wondering why none of it seems to matter the same way it used to. That's what was happening. Room 214 was pulling all three of them toward it like gravity. On the morning of day 6, Zithran was mid-sentence, talking about nothing in particular, just filling the silence the way he'd gotten used to. When he stopped, he looked down. Cairo's hand. Something had shifted. He leaned closer. The fingers. Just the fingers. A small movement. Almost nothing. The kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't sitting close enough and paying close enough attention. But he was. And he saw it. Zithran straightened. Looked at Cairo's face. Still. Eyes still closed. Breathing steady. He looked back at the hand. Waited. The fingers shifted again. A slight curl. Not grabbing. Not reaching. Just moving. Like a signal from somewhere very far away. He stood and pressed the call button for the nurse. She came in within 30 seconds. Checked the monitors. Checked Cairo's responses. Wrote something on the chart. Zithran stood at the foot of the bed. "What does it mean?" he said. She looked at him. Measured her words. "That kind of movement can indicate a few things," she said carefully. The brain starting to reach back toward awareness. The body responding to the environment. She paused. Or it could be involuntary. Neurological fluctuation. She looked at the chart again. "We'll need to monitor it closely." She left. Zithran stood in the quiet. The monitor beeped. And the doctor came in an hour later, checked the same reading, and said the thing that made the whole room feel like it shifted on its axis. That could mean awareness coming back. He looked at Zithran directly. Or it could mean decline. The apartment was on Delwood. 3rd floor. No elevator. One window that faced a brick wall. Zithran found out about it from the discharge paperwork. An address that didn't match anything he remembered. Not the house. Not any of the properties he knew Cairo had access to after the divorce. He drove there alone. He didn't tell Vaylor or Nyrix. He just needed to see it. The super let him in without much pushback. One look at Zithran. The coat, the posture, the way he didn't phrase things as questions. And the man stepped aside and handed over the key. The door swung open. Small. That was the first thing. Not uncomfortable small. Not temporary small. Just reduced. The kind of space a person moves into when they're cutting everything back to the bone and only keeping what they absolutely need. A bed. A small table. 2 chairs. A hot plate on the counter. A stack of folders near the window. Delivery schedules, route maps, shift logs. And on the wall beside the bed, a calendar. Zithran moved closer. Dates were circled. Some with small notes beside them. Doctor appointment moved. Rescheduled. Moved again. Then finally, confirmed 3 p.m. 1 appointment. In 5 months. 1. Because the others conflicted with shifts. He stood in the center of that small apartment and looked at the evidence of a life that had been quietly dismantled and rebuilt in the most stripped-down way possible. No luxury, no help, no safety net. And he felt something move through him that he didn't have a clean name for. Not guilt exactly. Something heavier. The kind that comes when you understand, not just in your head but all the way down, that someone suffered in silence because they made a calculation. And the calculation was, asking won't help. He opened the small cabinet above the hot plate. Canned goods. A box of crackers. A jar of peanut butter with a spoon still in it. That was it. He stood there with the cabinet door open. Pause on that. Cairo, who once made Sunday dinners from scratch. Who knew how to set a proper table. Who used to joke that bad food was a personal offense to him. Living on crackers and canned goods. Working nights. Hiding a pregnancy that was getting harder to hide every single week. Because he'd made a decision. He'd decided, quietly, alone, without drama, that the people who were supposed to be his family would not come. So he didn't ask. Zithran closed the cabinet. He moved to the table and sat down. And in front of him, tucked under one of the delivery folders, was a phone. Old model. Cracked screen down the center. He picked it up. It wasn't locked. He didn't go looking for anything specific. But the screen was already open. Already on something. A draft message. His own name at the top. Zithran Kale. The message had never been sent. He read it once. Then again. The words were short. Not dramatic. Not angry. Not the kind of thing a person writes when they want a reaction. Just honest. The kind of honest that comes from someone who has already stopped expecting much. He set the phone down. Sat in the quiet of that apartment, with the brick wall outside the window and the delivery schedules on the table and the crackers in the cabinet. And he didn't move for a long time. He already knew what the message said. He'd read it. But what stopped him, what actually stopped him, was the one line at the end. 7 words. And they were worse than anything Cairo could have screamed at him. He picked the phone back up. Read them again. I don't think you'd care anyway. It was 11:40 p.m. when it happened. The hospital floor was quiet. The day staff had turned over hours ago. The hallway outside room 214 had that particular nighttime stillness. Low lights, soft footsteps, the occasional sound of a cart moving somewhere in the distance. Zithran was in the chair. He'd been in it so long that he'd stopped noticing it. The discomfort had become background. A given. Like the beeping of the monitor. Like the low hum of the ventilation. He was holding Cairo's hand. Not tightly. Not dramatically. Just holding it. The way you hold on to something when you're not sure if you're the one doing the anchoring or the one who needs it. He'd been talking again. Low. Slow. The kind of talking that's more for the speaker than the listener, even when the speaker knows it. Nyrix finally told the Daylen partners he needed 30 days, he said. They weren't happy. He didn't care. He looked at Cairo's face. Still. Unmoving. That's new. For him. The monitor beeped. Valor made breakfast yesterday. At the family lounge down the hall. Actually made it. Eggs. He burned them a little but didn't say anything about it. Pause. He just ate them. Quiet. I found the apartment on Delwood. He stopped talking after that. Just sat. The clock on the wall moved to 11:52. And then, without warning, without build-up, without any of the gradual progression the doctors had been describing as the expected pattern, the fingers in his hand moved. Not a twitch this time. Not the small involuntary shift from 2 days ago. This was deliberate. Slow. Pressing. Cairo's fingers curled around Zithran's hand. Not fully. Not with strength. But with intent. The way someone holds on when they're coming back from somewhere very far away and the first thing they reach for is whatever is already there. Zithran didn't move. Didn't breathe wrong. He just stayed exactly where he was. Leaned forward hand in hand and waited. The monitor beeped. Steady. And then, a sound. Barely a sound. More like an exhale shaped into a word. Rough at the edges. Unfinished. Like someone speaking through water. You came back. 3 words. Zithran's jaw locked hard. He didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. Because the thing about hearing something you didn't know you needed to hear until it arrived. There's no immediate response. There's just the moment. The weight of it sitting on your chest like something that's been waiting a long time to land. He pressed his other hand over Cairo's. And when he finally spoke, his voice came out different. Quieter. Less controlled. I'm here, he said. He looked at Cairo's face. Eyes still closed. But the lines around them had shifted barely, just enough. I'm not going anywhere. The monitor held steady. Zithran looked at it. Then back at Cairo. The fingers were still curled around his hand. But Cairo's eyes hadn't opened. And the question, the one that sat in the gap between those 3 whispered words and everything that had happened over 6 months, wasn't answered. Was he waking up? Or was the body just remembering what the mind hadn't caught up to yet? The nurse came in at midnight for her check. She looked at the monitor, looked at Cairo, made a note on the chart, looked at Zithran. She didn't say anything right away. Then she checked the reading one more time and said something that made Zithran close his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. His heart rate has been the most stable it's been since he came in. She left. The room went quiet again. And Zithran sat in the stillness, hands still holding Cairo's, and he did not let go. He woke up on a Tuesday. No dramatic moment. No sudden gasp. No eyes flying open. Just present. One moment the room was the same quiet it had been for 12 days. And then Cairo's eyes opened, slowly, with the heavy resistance of someone surfacing from something very deep, and he was there, blinking at the ceiling. The nurse caught it first. She pressed the call button. The specialist came within 4 minutes. They moved around the bed with calm efficiency, checking responses, tracking his eyes, asking basic questions in low voices. Zithran stood in the corner, watching. He didn't move forward, didn't insert himself. He waited while they did what they needed to do. When the room cleared slightly, when the first wave of medical response settled into something calmer, Zithran moved to the side of the bed. Cairo's eyes tracked to him. That was something. He was aware, processing, taking in information, but his face didn't change. No recognition that softened into relief. No emotion that broke through whatever was sitting behind his eyes. He looked at Zithran the way someone looks at a thing they weren't expecting to see, and aren't yet sure how to feel about it. Zithran didn't push. He sat in the chair. "Hey," he said. That was it. Just that. Cairo looked at the ceiling. His voice, when it came, was rough. Dry from the tubes, from days of not using it. Came out slow and careful, like each word cost something. "How long?" he said. 12 days. A pause. Cairo looked at the window, at the light coming through, processing. "The baby," he said. "Fine," Zithran said. "They've been monitoring. Everything is okay." Something crossed Cairo's face at that. Not relief exactly. More like, he'd been carrying that question somewhere underneath all the unconsciousness, and the answer had just been set down. He exhaled. Then the room went quiet again. Valor and Nyrix came in an hour later. They didn't crowd him. Valor stood near the door. Nyrix stayed back, and Zithran stayed in the chair. The three of them in the room, together, the way they always were. Solid, certain, taking up space the way men like them always did without noticing it. And Cairo looked at them all, one by one, without warmth, without cold, just looking. Zithran spoke first. "We're here now." He meant it as a statement, as something solid, as the beginning of whatever came next. Cairo turned his head slightly, looked at the wall, and when he answered, his voice was still rough, but every word was intentional. "You weren't before." Nobody spoke, because there was nothing to say to that. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't even anger. It was just the truth, stated plainly, by someone who had lived the other side of their absence and was too tired and too clear-headed right now to dress it up as anything else. The monitor beeped. Valor shifted his weight near the door. Nyrix looked at the floor, and Zithran sat with it, all of it, without flinching, because flinching was the easy thing. Defending was the easy thing. Explaining was the easy thing. None of that was what this moment needed. What it needed was for them to hear it, and stay. Cairo looked back at the ceiling. His hand was on his stomach, barely, instinctively, and he didn't seem fully aware he'd done it. The specialist came back in 40 minutes later. He spoke directly, calmly, the way he'd been doing since the beginning. "We're encouraged by his responses," he said. "But I need to be direct with you all." He looked at Zithran first, then the others. Emotional stress at this stage of the pregnancy carries real risk. His body is still in recovery. Anything that raises his cortisol levels, that creates conflict or pressure or significant emotional strain. He stopped. Let that land. Could harm the pregnancy. They stopped trying to fix it. That was the shift. And it happened without a meeting, without a decision, without Zithran laying out a strategy the way he normally would, structured, efficient, outcome-focused. It just happened. Because they finally understood, after 12 days in that hospital, after the message on the cracked phone, after 7 words that couldn't be unsaid, that this was not a problem that responded to that approach. So they changed. Quietly, practically, without announcement. Zithran stopped managing the room when he walked into it. He stopped entering with the energy of someone who had already calculated the outcome. He would come in, sit, ask if Cairo needed anything. And if the answer was no or silence, which happened often, he stayed anyway. Just present. Not pressing. Valor started bringing food. Not orders placed from restaurants. Not catered trays. He would go to the small place 2 blocks from the hospital. A corner spot with good soup and real bread, and come back with things that were warm and smelled like actual cooking. He'd set them on the table without comment. Step back. Let Cairo decide. Sometimes Cairo ate. Sometimes he didn't. Valor never reacted either way. Nyrix was the hardest adjustment, because Nyrix's version of care had always looked like control. Fixing things. Removing problems. Building walls around people to keep the threat out. That was how he showed up for people he valued. But that's not what this needed. What this needed was for him to sit in a room and not run the room. And he was learning. Slowly. Imperfectly. But consistently. Days passed like this. Cairo watched them. Not with suspicion exactly, though that was part of it. More like someone who has been burned enough times that they need to see the temperature hold before they move closer. He was measuring. Taking in information. Adjusting his read of the situation one day at a time. He didn't push them out. But he didn't pull them in either. He existed in the space between, which was honest, which was fair, and which was more than any of them had earned the right to expect. On day 7 after waking, the doctor cleared him for short walks down the hall. Zithran went with him the first time. They didn't talk much. Cairo moved slowly, one hand on the railing. Zithran stayed a half step back. Close enough to be there, far enough not to crowd. At the end of the hall, Cairo stopped. Looked out the window at the street below. Then he said it, quietly, without looking at Zithran. Why now? Not angry, not accusing, just asking. The real question, the one under everything else. Zithran stood beside him. He thought about a careful answer, about the right framing, about how to say something that would land well and hold up and move them forward. And then he decided against all of that. Because we finally see what we lost, he said. Cairo didn't respond immediately. He looked at the street. A bus moving through. A woman with a stroller. An ordinary Tuesday happening below the glass like the world had no idea what was going on up here. He exhaled. Still didn't look at Zithran. But he didn't walk away either. And that, right there, was the first real thing that had shifted between them since this started. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. Just one honest answer. And the door had opened, just barely, just enough. Discharge day came on a Thursday. Gray sky. No rain. The kind of morning that doesn't commit to anything. Not warmth, not cold. Just neutral light and open air and the particular quiet of early. Cairo dressed himself. He did it slowly. The pregnancy made everything slower now, more deliberate. But he did it without asking for help. Zithran was in the room. He saw it. He didn't move to assist. He let Cairo do what Cairo was doing. That mattered. The nurses came through with paperwork. Instructions. Follow-up appointments already scheduled, real ones at a real practice with a real support plan attached to them. Valor had arranged it 2 days ago. He hadn't made a production of it. Just left the folder on the table and said it was done. Nyrix had found an apartment. Not a palace. Not something that announced power or tried to compensate with square footage. A real place. Clean, ground floor for easy access. A spare room for what was coming. A building with an actual management team and a quiet block. He'd shown Cairo the photos the day before. Cairo had looked at them. Didn't say much. Then, "It has a window in the kitchen." "Yeah," Nyrek said. Cairo handed the photos back. Okay. That was it. Not excitement. Not gratitude performed for an audience. Just a man who had been living under a single window facing a brick wall deciding that a kitchen window facing an actual street was acceptable. Small. True. The car pulled around front. Zithran walked beside Cairo through the lobby. Slow pace. No rushing. The automatic doors slid open and the outside air came in cool, carrying something that smelled like the city after a night of light rain. And Cairo stopped just at the threshold. 1 second. Just standing there. Taking in the outside after 3 weeks of machines and beeping and artificial light and the long, slow work of coming back. Zithran stopped beside him. Didn't speak. Didn't fill it. Just stood there in that doorway with him. The way you stand with someone when you understand that the moment belongs to them and your job is to not take it. Cairo stepped outside. They walked to the car. He didn't say anything on the ride to the new apartment. Neither did the others. The city moved past the windows. Storefronts. A school. A park with people already using it despite the gray. At the apartment, Vaylor held the door. Cairo went in first. He moved through the space slowly. Touched the counter in the kitchen. Stood at the window, the kitchen window, the one facing the street, and looked out for a moment. The three of them waited in the living room. Not hovering. Not performing patience. Just waiting. Because this was his moment. His space. His call. After a while, Cairo came back into the living room. He looked at them. All three. In a way he hadn't looked at them since before the divorce. Not with the distance that had grown between them. Not with the careful blankness from the hospital bed. Just looked. Something in his face had shifted. Not all the way. Not clean and clear and resolved. But shifted. He sat down on the couch. And after a moment, a beat of silence that said more than most words could, he said, "You can stay for a while." Not an invitation to move back in. Not a declaration. Not forgiveness handed over like it was something to be transacted. Just stay for a while. Zithran sat across from him. Vaylor moved to the chair near the window. Nyrek stayed standing for a moment, then sat too. The room was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Because here's the thing about love that fails and then tries again. It doesn't come back the way it left. Comes back slower. Smaller at first. More careful. Shaped differently by everything that happened in between. And the people who earn their way back don't arrive with speeches. They arrive with presence. With consistency. With the willingness to sit in a room without demanding that the room be different from what it is. Cairo looked at his hands. Then at the window. Then at Zithran just for a second. Just long enough. He didn't say, "I forgive you." He didn't say, "We're okay." He didn't hand anything over that he wasn't ready to give. But he was there. And they were there. And for the first time in longer than any of them wanted to count, nobody was walking away. Love isn't proven when things are easy. It shows up in the decision to stay after the failure, after the silence, after the 12 days of machines and the drafts that never got sent, and simply be present for whatever comes next. Cairo looked out the kitchen window at the street below. A woman walking a dog. A kid on a bike. A delivery truck idling at the corner. The world doing what it does. And inside this apartment, in this quiet, with these three men sitting with him in the space he'd been handed. Not the space he'd asked for because he hadn't asked. He didn't move away. That was enough. For now, that was enough. If this story moved you, if you've ever carried something alone that you didn't have to, drop a comment and tell us what finally made you let someone back in. And if you want more stories like this, stories about real strength, quiet healing, and love that has to earn its way back, Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on the notification bell. Every week we bring you stories that don't just entertain. They stay with you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Your comment might be exactly what someone else needed to read.